In early 2025, a fortress once deemed impregnable, a bastion that had repelled numerous bloody assaults, collapsed with a speed likened to a thunderclap from a clear sky. This was not merely the loss of territory. It was a severe tactical lesson, heralding a profound shift in the dynamics of the entire eastern Ukraine front. This is the story of how Ugledar, the steel gate south of Donetsk, crumbled, and what its fall reveals about the state of the conflict in 2025. By the beginning of 2025, the Donetsk front was mired in a grueling stalemate. Following the capture of Avdiivka in February 2024 and the consolidation of gains around Ugledar by October of the same year, the Russian army maintained relentless pressure on a series of Ukrainian defensive lines stretching along the Donetsk-Zaporizhia corridor. Ukraine, contending with acute shortages of both manpower and ammunition, faced the strategic dilemma of where and how to mount its defense. Some intelligence suggested that Kyiv was attempting to orchestrate a breakthrough on a different front, possibly in the Kursk region, to alleviate the pressure on Donbass. However, such an operation would inevitably place further strain on already overstretched resources. The objectives of the belligerents were clear and divergent. For Russia, Ugledar was never a singular goal. Its capture by late 2024 was seen as forcing open a critical door. The strategic aim for 2025 was to exploit this breakthrough, initiating new offensive vectors to encircle other key urban centers like Pokrovsk and Kurakhove, thereby gradually tightening the noose around Ukraine's formidable Donbass fortress ring. For Ukraine, having lost the city, the immediate objective was to stabilize the defensive line and prevent a catastrophic chain reaction of collapses. Holding the adjacent areas became a mission of paramount importance, essential for safeguarding the larger logistical hubs and vital supply lines positioned further to the rear. The designation of Ugledar as the Steel Gate was rooted in its geography and construction. Strategically, the city is situated on commanding high ground, granting superior observation in fields of fire over the vast open plains that surround it. Critically, it sits astride a vital transportation artery, a key link in the railway network connecting the Russian border to the southern front. Control of Ugledar meant command over a major logistics channel, severely inhibiting the enemy's capacity to move reinforcements and supplies across a wide operational area. The city's physical structure presented an equally formidable challenge. Ugledar is not an open town but a dense urban landscape composed of numerous fortified concrete apartment blocks from the Soviet era. Each building functioned as a self-contained fortress, a design that had previously inflicted devastating losses on Russian frontal assaults with armored columns. In one particularly costly engagement, dozens of tanks and armored vehicles were destroyed as they attempted to advance into this prepared killing ground. The main developments of the campaign illustrate a shift from a siege to a total collapse. The initial Russian attacks in early 2023 were a tactical disaster. Marine units were sent in direct assaults against entrenched Ukrainian positions, resulting in exceptionally high casualties and materiel losses. With an estimated several hundred vehicles annihilated, this calamitous defeat compelled the Russian command to fundamentally overhaul its operational doctrine. By 2024, a new strategy had taken shape. Instead of direct ground attacks, Russia adopted a siege tactic, sometimes referred to as the clay pot, designed to systematically isolate and erode the city's defenses. This involved the concentration of immense firepower, primarily from artillery and most decisively from the air. Hundreds of guided glide bombs, known as UMPKs, were dropped daily, including massive 1.5-ton thermobaric munitions designed specifically to obliterate fortified structures. This aerial firestorm effectively leveled defensive positions, clearing the path for elite infantry units who advanced methodically, severing Ukraine's supply and communication lines around the city. The turning point was not a single decisive battle, but rather the cumulative effect of this relentless pressure. Logistical strains and a decline in morale on the Ukrainian side became increasingly severe. Reports emerged of desertions and the low combat effectiveness of newly mobilized recruits sent as reinforcements. With the encirclement tightening from 3 directions and the final supply route under imminent threat, the Ukrainian command issued an order for an orderly withdrawal in October 2024. The decision was made to avoid the complete annihilation of the garrison. The battle for Ugledar was a crucible for tactical and technological evolution. On the Russian side, it showcased a crucial lesson learned: the overwhelming application of firepower. A significant shift occurred from a reliance on traditional artillery to a potent combination with vast numbers of precision glide bombs. This marked a key distinction from previous urban warfare campaigns, such as the one for Bakhmut. Furthermore, Russia refined its peak pitch tactic, abandoning large-scale massed assaults in favor of a more deliberate approach. Firepower was used to attrit enemy positions, after which small, flexible infantry groups would infiltrate, encircle, and methodically isolate each stronghold, a method that minimized their own casualties. However, this tactic was not without its drawbacks. It demanded a very high level of coordination between air and ground forces, consumed enormous quantities of ammunition, and resulted in slow, grinding progress. Its effectiveness was contingent upon an absolute superiority in firepower and the luxury of time. From Ukraine's perspective, the battle presented a massive challenge. Its initial strengths lay in its robust fortifications, the effective use of the defensive terrain, and the deployment of drones for surveillance and targeting, which proved highly effective against direct assaults. Later, however, these advantages were negated. Ukraine lacked any effective countermeasures against the mass bombardment by glide bombs, and its insufficient air defense systems could not interdict all incoming threats. A critical shortage of artillery ammunition severely curtailed its ability to provide suppressive fire and conduct counter-battery operations. Most importantly, a severe manpower crisis took its toll. Soldiers were exhausted after years of continuous combat, and a lack of quality reserves for rotation left the defensive lines increasingly thin and vulnerable. In the aftermath of the city's fall, the strategic door was now open. Ukraine's response was a painful but pragmatic withdrawal, a decision aimed at preserving its forces for future battles. Nevertheless, this failure created a significant breach in its defensive architecture. Ukraine was compelled to hastily establish a new defensive line further to the west. While Russia gained a crucial springboard for subsequent operations, the impact rippled across the broader front. The Ugledar campaign became a template for subsequent Russian operations. Soon after, similar tactics of overwhelming aerial bombardment followed by methodical ground advances were applied in the direction of Pokrovsk, a much larger and more logistically significant city. Pressure on the entire Donetsk region intensified dramatically. The positions of cities like Kharkov, Kostiantynivka, and even Slavyan of Ukraine's last major strongholds in the Donetsk Oblast began to appear precarious. The significance of the campaign was multifaceted. Militarily, Ugledar demonstrated that even the most heavily fortified stronghold could be overcome. If it was systematically isolated and eroded by superior firepower, it marked a notable maturation in Russia's combined arms tactics, signaling a shift from brute force assaults to a more systematic, if still materially costly, methodology. Psychologically, the loss of a key defensive symbol dealt a significant blow to Ukrainian morale. It amplified Russian narratives about the inevitability of their operational success, while simultaneously raising difficult questions within Ukraine regarding its long-term defensive strategy and capabilities. Politically, the defeat at Ugledar and the subsequent loss of territory increased pressure on the Kyiv government, both on the domestic front and at the international negotiating table. It provided Russia with additional leverage in any potential ceasefire discussions, likely accompanied by increasingly stringent demands. However, the battle did not resolve the conflict's fundamental dynamics. The victory at Ugledar did not mean Russia could advance unimpeded across the entire front. Larger cities within the Donbass fortress belt, such as Slavyansk and Kramatorsk, are geographically larger, have been fortified since 2014, and would present a challenge on a completely different scale, both in terms of size and the duration required for any operation. The war remained a massive drain on resources for both sides. Debate continues to revolve around two principal points of controversy. First was Ukraine's allocation of limited resources to other operations, such as those in the Kursk region, the primary cause for Ugledar's rapid fall? Or was the collapse simply the unavoidable consequence of the stark disparity in firepower and manpower? Second, was Ukraine's decision to withdraw made too late, and at what cost and experienced forces sacrificed during the prolonged resistance? Casualty figures from both sides remain highly contested and are exceptionally difficult to verify independently. In summary, the battle for Ugledar in 2025 was more than a single military engagement. It stands as a case study in the evolution of modern warfare, where new technologies like drones and glide bombs, combined with tactics of encirclement and erosion, broke the stalemate of fortified defenses. Ukraine's defeat was the result of a deadly synergy between overwhelming enemy firepower and its own systemic vulnerabilities in manpower and materiel. So, will Russia successfully apply the lessons from Ugledar to bring a swift conclusion to the war? Or is this just another bloody chapter in a protracted conflict? The steel door of Ugledar has been forced open, but behind it lies the vast and complex defensive labyrinth of Ukraine. The answer lies not only in the flash of gunfire on the Donetsk battlefield, but also in the output of arms factories, the deliberations in international aid conferences, and the enduring will of two nations. The war in 2025, therefore, still has many pages left to be written.